Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I have a very special guest with me today. First time on the podcast. He's a writer and a letterer, and we got some fun comics that we're going to talk about. Please welcome to the podcast, Joe Caramagna. Joe, how are you doing?
Jimmy, this is a very long time in the making, my friend.
Yeah, I feel like it is. I think I did a series where I interviewed letterers for Comic Book Yeti, and I feel like maybe you were just busy at the time, because I'm sure that I would have reached out to you because you've lettered so many, I mean, amazing comics. Any fan of Marvel comics, I'm sure, is familiar with your lettering work.
Yeah, I've been around a while.
I think I was in research for this, was reading, another interview that you had done over the years. And I think one of the things that stood out to me was that back in, I don't know, 2010 or 2012, that you had lettered like 100 issues of, was it Amazing Spider-Man, like that, a whole run?
Yeah, I did. At one point, I did 100 consecutive issues. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I can't believe that 2012 or what, if 2010, 2012, whenever it was, doesn't seem like that long ago, but you don't see too many of the same letterers, even, for big two publications, like sticking with a run like that. You also don't see too many writers and artists that get a chance on a run like that.
Right. Well, see, the good thing about being a letterer on a series is that you don't really get blamed when sales start to go down. So they keep me around.
Right.
I'm like the cockroach, like you can't get rid of me. So, but
Oh,
I'm about to blow your mind because you said that you remember when I lettered 100 consecutive issues. I just recently, maybe a few weeks ago, lettered my 300th Amazing Spider-Man.
oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah, that shows you how long I've been doing this. But
Wow.
also how often we publish Amazing Spider-Man, right?
Well, yeah. I, I'm my first thought was like, how many different creative teams, though, like, was through that run? Like, you had to, other than maybe like the whoever's in charge of like the group, like the group editor or the individual editor, you have to be like the one person, like with the most consistency on throughout that many issues,
Yeah, I'm
right?
the last man standing. Oh, yeah. I've
Wow.
seen everyone. I started when they were doing that, the rotating cast of writers after,
Yeah.
Brand New Day, and, yeah, so I started and Mark Waid was writing Amazing Spider-Man. That's when Dan Slott was starting. Um, who else was doing that? I'm drawing a blank now. Maybe Mark Guggenheim at the time?
Okay.
They just had, like,
Wow.
rotating writers and artists,
Yeah.
and I was lettering them all, and then, it became Dan Slott full-time for a while, and, he was on there for a very long time too, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm still around, still here.
Well, congrats, Joe. That's remarkable. Um,
Thank you. I always say that, no matter what else I'm doing in life, I'm still going to be lettering Amazing Spider-Man until either they fire me or I'm dead. So, it's my favorite it was my favorite series as a kid. It's like the series that made me wanna work in comics. So, it's like that's the one thing, like, I wanna still be doing. Like, they can take other stuff away from me, move me around, it doesn't matter. But Amazing Spider-Man, I always wanna do. It's like
that's,
my book. So, I
I mean, that,
enjoy reading it for free.
yeah, I bet. I mean, that's incredible. As a writer yourself, it, do you get into like, different modes, like when you're lettering a comic and having worked with so many different creative teams, like if you hadn't been a writer before, it almost seems a bit, if you're able to, I guess, pay attention enough, like a little bit of like a master class in comic scripting to go through that many like
Oh,
different
yeah.
creative teams on a book like that. Like, do you think like, well, I'm a writer. I know how to write. I do these things. Or do you ever, when they put somebody on a book, you're like, oh man, I'm really going to get to check out this script. Does that cross your your mind at all? Do you take time to do that? Or are you solely focused on, just lettering?
No, like I definitely pay attention to that. I always say that I probably wouldn't be a working writer had I not lettered so many like Ed Brubaker comics and Mark Waid comics. I learned so much from lettering their scripts, and they're also they just happen to be very generous with their time and entertaining, whatever questions I have or, comments. And they always were willing to offer advice. So lettering those books is extremely valuable. It was very valuable to what I do now, for sure.
Yeah,
And
I
I've
want to.
worked with a lot of great writers. Like I even worked with Stan Lee at one point. I lettered a Stan Lee comic way back in the day.
Did you
So I've
really?
worked. Oh yeah, I worked. It was a special. I forget which issue it was, but it was like a one shot.
Okay.
Um, and so I've worked with everybody, and
Wow.
it's so great to be able to compare them and to see their different approaches. It's definitely like I'm surprised there aren't more letterers who are writers just for that reason. Just because you get to learn so much and you see it in the whole process along the chain. You don't just see the final product. You see how it's actually made. You see the notes from editorial. Um, going back and forth with the writers about what they should change and why. So you really, I don't know how you can't learn from that experience. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is, but that is incredible. 300 issues too. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Um,
exhausting, but it's good. It's good. I love it. Like I seriously, I wouldn't want to do anything else. Like I just
yeah.
love working on Amazing Spider-Man. So no matter what else I'm doing, no matter how many books I'm writing, like that would be the last thing I would ever give up if I had to give up to make room in my schedule. That would be the very last thing.
Okay. Well, I mean, makes a lot of sense. That would be the last thing on the list you'd want to give up. And well, I want to switch. I want to go eventually make our way back to talking, about lettering and how you got into it. But I know that you have a book coming out, Space Chasers, which is going to be out February 4th. So I think we're recording this episode. Actually, this is my first episode that we're recording in 2025.
Nice.
As we record this on in early January. But when this episode drops, folks will be able to get ready for it'll be right before February 4th, and Space Chasers is out. And yeah, you sent me over. Oh yeah,
I
you
have
have
an
it.
have an
The
advanced copy right here.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, so you had mentioned this when we scheduled the podcast that this is something that you were working on, and I was delighted because to see that it was written along with Leland Melvin, who
Yep.
I instantly recognized as the astronaut who in his official NASA photo has his two dogs in it. Like, just knew right away as soon as I saw Leland Melvin. I was like, oh wow. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's uh and I think Leland Melvin is also a character in Space
In the book,
Chasers.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Which is
so
a
it's
lot of fun.
you and Leland Melvin are writing it. It's illustrated by Allison Acton.
Yep.
Um and yeah, I mean this sounds great. Middle school book. Your main character, I think, is Tia, who applies like for a test to be part of some NASA program to develop like I guess the next generation of space station. I mean,
Yep.
and then of course I'm sure something goes wrong and the kids all have to get together to figure it out. It just sounds like I mean, when I was a kid, I'm 45 now, but man, space and anything about space, like the movie Space Camp, like there were so many things geared, towards space and space exploration. And I was like a fan of all of them, whether it was the more realistic or like Star Trek The Next Generation, which hit at the same time. I was always
Yeah.
kind of fascinated by it. So I'm kind of curious in terms of like how this like came about, how you ended up getting involved in the writing of Space Chasers, and then did you have that early fascination with space exploration, like I think like I did, or was this kind of new to you, learning anything about space in order to write with Leland Melvin?
Well, I mean, like you, I'm a somewhat of a child of the '80s, right? So, um, I have very vivid memory of the Challenger explosion.
Oh,
So
yeah. Oh, geez.
that is something that kind of made me a little fascinated with space because I that seems like the moment in time where I realized how dangerous it is, space travel, because I wasn't born for, the Apollo missions in Apollo 1 that blew up, and Apollo 13 where, they nearly had a disaster in space.
Right.
So for me, the Challenger explosion was like, whoa, like this is like dangerous stuff. Like it's not like
Yeah.
Star Trek, it's not like Star Wars. Like this is really not that there's no danger in there. I mean, come on, they're dealing with like lightsabers and stuff. But like you realize that it's not just as routine as it became in our lives, it's not routine. Like Leland tells me all the time when we're working together, we're working out plots. And I always ask him, like, well, what if this happens? He goes, well, we all die. It's like, well, okay, but then what if this happens? Then we all die. It's like, so like there's like a 90% chance that everybody dies. How does anyone make it safely to space and back? Like it's
Wow.
amazing. It's really incredible. And
Yeah.
the way that Leland and I got together is that I had been writing for a publisher, and he came to me and said that Leland Melvin was pitching him ideas for a graphic novel, and like he'd never written graphic novels. So he said, well, maybe if I put you guys together, maybe you could help each other. So I said, who's Leland Melvin? Like the name sounds familiar. I'm not sure. And he goes, oh, it's the astronaut with the dogs. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I know exactly who it is. That's how I know his name. He's the astronaut with the dogs. Uh,
Absolutely.
and we connected, and we had a series of phone calls. And Leland is an amazing guy. Just has a great story, great history, knows everything uh, that there is about space, and most importantly, he knows how to explain everything to a dummy like me who isn't very like science oriented. Like I was always more concerned with like the human condition and human emotions, and that's like the perspective that I write from. I'm not really like a science geek or anything like that. I had an interest, but I was never like, like intensely like focused on. I never wanted to be an astronaut or anything like that. So I was never like
Sure.
into astronomy or anything like that. I just like, the drama of it all. So it's really great to be able to work with somebody who just knows so much and can explain it to me in a way that makes me understand it. Um, so it's no like surprise that he worked in like the education division of NASA after his space missions were over, because he's such a great communicator and very artistic, very artsy, which I have come to learn is a common trait among astronauts, actually.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, for any listeners who, aren't familiar with who we're talking about, or might just, know Leland Melvin's name from the NASA photo with the two dogs in it. I mean, his career, he worked for NASA for a number of years, Space Shuttle
yeah.
Atlantis. He
Yep.
also played in the NFL. He helped develop, I think, the White House or the Department of Education's like STEM program in terms of what they wanted kids to learn to develop STEM education. He's also a photographer and a musician. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
incredible.
He's an amazing guy. He's an incredible guy and very nice, like extremely nice, very thoughtful, nice guy. So we get
Wow.
along very well, and it's so cool that I could be like just driving in the car, and all of a sudden, you see the picture of the two dogs come up on the screen because he's calling me. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I've known him now for maybe 6 years, maybe at least 5 years. This project has been in development since before COVID. We sold the book in 2019, actually.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's a long time developing it.
Yeah, it's a long time, but the reason is because when we sold the book, they said, "Well, we don't want to buy the book. We want to buy a series." So this is actually the first book in a series of Space Chasers.
Oh,
And they're
wow.
actually all written, and Allison actually completed the art for the second book, and she started on the third one now. So um, we're moving and shaking on this thing, but it's been a long time in the making, very long time.
Yeah, I mean, that must, to be like, as we record, like a month away, like on the cusp of it, something that you've been working for so long. That
Yeah.
must be a nice feeling to know that it's right there, right?
Oh man, when I got the advanced copies, I was like a child. I was like running around my house holding the book. I'm like, it's real. I can't believe that it's real. It's been so long. We've been talking about it for so long and working on it for so many years now. Um, it's just so cool to see it that it's a real thing, and I can hold it and flip through it. It's amazing. Like that feeling, and I've been making comics now for 19 years. Um, since I started freelancing, and it just never gets old to see that it becomes a real thing. Because when you're involved in the making of something, from especially when it's as a writer, you start with just like a one sentence idea, and then to actually come out with a printed book that you can go in a store and see, it's like magic. It's the coolest. It's really the coolest thing ever. So, and it never gets old. Like that feeling is always there. Like you're like, I can't even believe that this. Like, how did we pull this off? It's incredible.
I mean, I did a little bit in terms of just for my understanding about, what Space Chasers was about. But, I mean, is there anything in terms of like the overall series? Is it really about I mean, the kids not only learning about space, but learning to, work together and the problems they encounter in space? I mean, is that idea, and I'm sure it's handled in a middle school appropriate way that I think, what does Matt Damon say in The Martian? Like, space wants to kill you. Like,
Yes.
is that concept like kind of brought to the fore a little bit as to the danger of it?
Yeah, definitely. I describe it as it's sort of like Willy Wonka meets Space Camp.
Okay.
Um, but what
Oh, I
it's
like that.
Yeah, and what it's really about though is how space is for everybody and the future is for everybody. No matter who you are or where you're from or how you were born, like everybody has the right stuff. Like everybody's good at something that is useful. Everybody has value. And actually, the main character Tia, her last name is Valor, Valor, which in English, it spells valor, which is like courage under fire.
Mhm.
But in Portuguese, valor means to have value, to have worth. And Tia doesn't believe that she has anything to offer. And she quickly learns that when she's in the soup and things are going down and things get serious, that that's where you find out that that's where you test your metal. And that's really what the series is about. Is how everybody has something to offer, everybody has some worth, and we need to have like a diversity of thought to solve the major problems that we have in the world, and not just things like deforestation or like freshwater depletion or climate change and things like that, but even societal problems. Like to really understand things, you need a variety of just different perspectives to learn how to really solve a problem that works for everybody. And if you have just the same type of people working on a solution, people who are educated similarly from maybe the same place, um, they're all going to kind of reach the same conclusion. Like we really need to figure out solutions that work for everybody to move forward. And that's where everyone has value. Everyone has a point of view, everyone has perspective, everyone has something that they're good at. Like Leland and I say, if you're really good at video games, you're probably going to be really good on a flight simulator too. So
Yeah.
we're
Well,
hoping that we can inspire kids to pursue careers in STEAM, not just STEM. Leland always corrects me,
oh,
but STEAM because art is a big part of it.
you're right.
That's where the creativity comes in. So, we're hoping that we can inspire kids to maybe, not sell themselves short and believe that they can apply the skills that they're good at and, to literally reach for the stars because we need everyone to move into the future.
Wow, that is awesome. Joe, I love that. I mean, that just sounds fantastic. And to think it's going to be a series of books, and this is just the first in that series. I mean, I love that idea. I'm a dad. I'm a parent myself.
Yeah.
Have two kids that are 12 and 7. And I think this is probably right in that zone where both of them would really like it. Would kind of get into it and want to check out these characters and know more about space. My
Yeah.
7-year-old right now, she likes to, she has there's an app on my phone that tells you what the constellations are, and
Yeah.
she always wants to know, like, what is that? Is that a planet? Which one is that?
My daughter too, she has a similar, probably the same app. But she's a senior in high school now, and she's looking at colleges, and she does want to be an astronaut. So she absolutely is blown away that I know Leland Melvin. She didn't need to be told that it's the astronaut with the dog. She knew who he
Yeah,
was.
right.
And so she's fascinated by all this stuff. So that really,
Oh,
it wasn't really my interest in space as a kid that really made
right.
me excited about this. It's my daughter's interest. She's all into astronomy. And she wants to study astrophysics in college. So it's getting serious. It's getting there.
Yeah, yeah.
But she was definitely an inspiration, and as a matter of fact, I dedicated the book to her.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, good luck to
My
your
other 2
daughter.
kids aren't too happy about that, but
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll
it's a
dedicate something else
series.
to them. It's a
It's a
series.
series.
There you
I told
go.
them they get 1 each.
Yeah. I I've only ever met one. I met one an astronaut once before. That was the I think my wife worked at a school in Delaware County in PA, and at one point in time, the president of the school for like a year or two while she worked there was a former astronaut. Oddly enough, named Guy Gardner.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
but his yeah, but I I remember before we were going to her work holiday party, she's like, "Oh, and you're gonna get to meet the president of Williamson," was the name of the school. And I'm like, "Oh, who's that?" And she's like, "Guy Gardner." And I'm like, "The Green Lantern?" And she's like, "No, but he was a former astronaut." And I'm like, "He was an astronaut?"
That's amazing.
Uh, but yeah, very exciting stuff, and exciting that it's most times whenever somebody is on here who's a parent, it's like their kids are not impressed by anything. It is really nice to hear that your daughter is, impressed that you're involved in these books, Joe. That
Well,
gives
I
hope to all
finally
parents out there.
finally did something to impress my kids.
Yeah,
They
not
don't care about, I've worked on so many Marvel comics. They're like,
right.
because that's what I've been doing all their lives. Like I said,
Yeah,
I've been doing this for 19 years. I started my Marvel internship 25 years ago. So
right. Yeah,
yeah,
they don't care about Spider-Man. They don't care about
no,
DuckTales.
no, not at all. You know what they like when I got them into like free screenings of the Marvel movies. That's when they're impressed. Like I bring them to the Marvel screenings, and they save their little tickets and
Oh,
take pictures outside. Yeah, that's the one thing that impressed them. It's like the MCU, and now knowing an astronaut.
yeah. And now this. Well, that's great. Space Chasers, February 4th. It's volume 1.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think it's like 240 pages.
It is. Yeah.
So that is sizable. That is fantastic.
Well, that's what happens when they say just make it as many pages as you like.
Yeah, just
Like,
see
oh,
what I read.
okay.
Uh, in working on it at all, you said, I mean, you said you weren't really interested in the science of it, but that Leland was able to explain a lot of things. But did working on it at all, or maybe that, working on Space Chasers combined with your daughter's interest, did it give you like any curiosity about some of those things, like, to want to go into space? to think like, oh, if there was ever a chance, like if I had an opportunity, like if there was commercial space flights and it was affordable, uh, would you ever consider doing it? Or
I would never want to go to space unless it were like a baby Kal-El situation and the planet was blowing up and I had to. That
that's
would
it?
be that would be the only way. I can't see myself ever going to space. It frightens me, especially when
Yeah,
Leland is telling me like, "Oh, if this happens, everyone dies." I mean, I don't I don't even go on roller coasters. So, hey.
that was Penny just popped
Hi,
into
Penny.
frame.
Yeah.
Joe says hi.
Hi. Hi.
That's my 7-year-old. That's Penny.
Ah,
Um,
nice. Ah, I miss those days. See, my youngest is turning 17 next month, so
okay.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
terrible. Uh,
I'm sorry. I have a little
thank you.
ways. I have a little ways to go. But no, you were saying you don't even like roller coasters?
Yeah, I don't even like roller coasters, so I can't see
Okay.
myself going to space, and it scares my wife to death that our daughter wants to be an astronaut. But I mean, I think that's cool. I mean, as afraid as I would be, like it's it's like air travel, like people are afraid to fly in planes, but you see it's so incredibly safe. I mean, especially compared to driving a car. Like
Oh yeah.
they really got it down. I mean, all the Boeing controversies notwithstanding, but
Yeah.
it is very safe. So you see, like, we're sending astronauts to the ISS like over and over again, and you never really hear about. I know there's a couple astronauts that are kind of somewhat stranded there now, but they're safe. Their lives are in danger, so aren't in danger. So, um, yeah, it really is safe. It's
Yeah.
just,
They just have a bit of an extended stay on the
yeah,
space
yeah,
station.
yeah. But everything is so super safe now that it's incredible considering how many things can go wrong. Like you said, Matt Damon says like space is trying to kill you. And it's true. We're not supposed to be up there, you know? And it's amazing how safe it is, all things considered.
Yeah. So I was just curious because I would think like, I was so enamored with it as a kid, and I would just be like, I always think like, yeah, if there was a way that it was affordable, I think I'd do it. Although, who was it? There was a celebrity that went into space recently. Was it William Shatner? And like,
William Shatner went up, yeah.
but what he wrote about afterwards was some of the most deeply terrifying, like existential crises I think
Yeah.
I've ever like read. Just how it wasn't. I guess it wasn't what he thought. I think he had wrote. I can probably put a link to the show notes if I can find it, but it just seemed like it made him feel very, like, small and
Yeah.
alone,
Right. There
but
is I think there's a word for it. There's like a name for it when you're up in space and you look down on the earth for the first time and the feeling you have for it. I wish Leland were here to explain this. But it is like it's a phenomenon. It's like how you have like this deep feeling that you're
yeah.
like, wow. It like I can't believe how obviously it looks different from up there, but and we touch on this in the book. Like when you're up there, you don't see borders, you don't see anything, you don't see any differences. You just see like one big planet. And when you're on the space station, you see every part of it every 90 minutes that you're going around. So it's this incredible feeling. I wish I remembered like what they call it. I'm gonna have to find out from Leland, but yeah,
Yeah,
it
let
it
me
does
let
it
let me
does do
know.
something to you. It
Oh,
really does do something to you. So I remember reading that what Shatner wrote, but I don't remember what he said.
yeah, if I find it, I'll put it in the show notes for listeners so
Yeah.
they can they can, uh, read about Shatner's trip to space, but, yeah, I think I just remember him saying something like it made him sad or filled him with sadness, but,
Yeah. I
but yeah,
mean,
I mean,
I
I
can
guess that is
imagine
one.
never having been up to space, obviously, but I can imagine how it makes you feel so small and insignificant in a way, you know? Like we worry about things that really most things that we worry about or we get upset about that bother us really don't mean anything um in the grand scheme of things when you realize how large everything is and we're just like a little speck on on a small little thing that's flying
Yeah.
through space. I mean, it's pretty incredible to think about.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with your day-to-day issues or problems or, anxieties, whatever, whatever it is that is occupying your time, and then, it's hard for us to wrap our heads around, or like, I won't speak for every human. It's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, exactly how, like, big, the
Yeah,
universe is. And I think even
for
getting a
sure.
glimpse of that from the other side, from space, would be terrifying. A
Yeah,
little
I can
bit. I
imagine.
would,
Yeah.
um, but that's why when I was reading about Space Chasers, like the group of kids that are there, seems like a very diverse group, but also, the idea of team building or working together, I think is the only way, um, you know, you would have to get through space travel. I mean, I don't think that could ever be space travel could ever be, like, accomplished as, like, a solo endeavor, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And just like I said, these books kind of taught me a lot about space and human space flight. These characters also taught me a lot because I'm writing about, it's an ensemble cast. I mean, we focused on the first book mostly on Tia, but it's an ensemble cast and they're all different and they have all different backgrounds. And just trying to see the world through their eyes, you really do learn a lot. Like we have a character named Steven who has cerebral palsy and he uses a wheelchair. And I suddenly found myself like noticing all the wheelchair ramps, on the street, and lack of wheelchair ramps is really what like, I guess it's not strange to notice a wheelchair ramp, but then I started noticing where there weren't, you know, because
Yeah.
I had like sort of lived the experience through his eyes.
Yeah.
And so it's not just that learning about space, it's just learning about people. When you have all these different types of people that you can see, you look at things through their lens. It's pretty incredible. It's like probably my favorite thing about writing is just learning about humans and why we do things and how we do things. It's pretty awesome. And like, working since I worked on these books, going back a little bit what we were talking about, thinking about, the planet and how
Yeah.
huge everything is. I noticed that like I started just looking up in the sky, like just stopping, like once a day, I just stop and I just like look up. And like, I know there's science behind it, but it still feels like it's a miracle, that we're here, that we're alive and how everything works and everything has to go right for us to be alive here on this planet, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
So there's other planets where the conditions don't support life. And
Right.
it's just incredible. Like it gave me such a deep appreciation for just everything that we have. And it totally changed my perspective just learning about space. So I hope that other people get that same feeling, like when they get inspired, hopefully by reading these books and they want to learn more about space and
Yeah.
the planet, our own planet, that they get a similar feeling.
That's awesome. Oh, well, I can't wait to read it. And
Thank you.
a shout out to my brother Bobby, who is the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes, and he goes to Baltimore Comic Con with me every year. Listeners of the podcast know because I talk about Bobby. Like I shout him out every episode. But hopefully Bobby's going to want a copy as well. I don't. Hopefully he won't mind me saying this, but Bobby has 4 kids, and he has a daughter, and he has 3 identical triplet sons. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and Cooper, one of the sons, has cerebral palsy, and it's when you have somebody like Cooper in the family, and Cooper's awesome. Um, you see, and not all the time firsthand. It's my nephew, but with Bobby and his wife, like, and the other kids, like you see every time they have to do something, like what that entails. Um, and no, I think it's you know, Bobby Bobby loves that you don't see much somebody especially in a comic and other things you do, but someone with cerebral palsy. And, something like that is, I think a great addition. I can't wait to read about Steven and get Bobby a copy of the book so he can read it to Cooper. That's
Oh,
awesome.
awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to hear what he thinks of it.
Well, I will, I'll let you know. But Joe, I wanted to kind of circle back a little bit, if we could, in terms of like your career and first getting into writing and lettering. I know that you went to I think the Kubert School early on. And
Right.
is that what led to your Marvel internship?
Yeah, actually, it directly led to my Marvel internship. I never actually applied to be a Marvel intern. Marvel came to the Kubert School to look for interns. They were doing an in-house lettering department. I guess they want to have some of their lettering done there on site,
Okay.
but they needed letterers. So they came to the Kubert School looking for interns that they could then train, and hopefully they would end up working in-house in the lettering department. So my lettering instructor at the time, because when you go to the Kubert School, as a lot of my fellow QBs and former QBs know, they insist that you learn everything about making comics. So you have to learn your
Hmm.
lettering, you have to learn inking, you learn everything, like soup to nuts, everything. So it doesn't matter if you want to be a penciler, you're going to learn how to letter too. You're going to learn everything. So my instructor at the time was Hy Eisman, who's a old school cartoonist. He what did he work on? Popeye for many years. Dondi, if you're familiar.
No, I don't know that one.
So
Is that
oh,
is that
you
like
gotta look it up.
is that a strip or like a
Yeah,
cereal?
it's a strip. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was my lettering instructor, and he actually recommended me and a couple of others to Marvel, and we went to go interview, and I don't
Oh, wow.
they chose me for some reason, and that really led me down a path because I don't know what I would have done otherwise, because I went to the Kubert School to become a penciler, and I learned real quick that that wasn't in the cards for me, because it's one thing to be most artistic in your high school yearbook. But then when you walk into a school that's filled with people who are most artistic in their high school yearbook, it's pretty intimidating. And some of the most talented people, even today, that I ever met, were in my class. I went to the school. So yeah, I knew that I had to lean into other things. So I took every class seriously, and I tried really hard in lettering. And I guess High noticed that, and he recommended me. And somehow I managed to fool them. They hired me.
Well, I mean, I think if you did fool him, if it was a trick, it was one of the best ones ever pulled, because you'd have to think, if you weren't any good at it, you wouldn't have been doing it as long as you have been.
I think even more than being good at it is trying really hard to be good at it.
Yeah,
That because I don't even know if I'm good at it, but I am always trying to be better. So I guess that's a quality that works for you. If anyone's listening for any advice,
that's
that's
it.
mine. Always
So,
try to get better.
so had you wanted to write or thought about writing, like, before you started lettering, or was it like the Kubert School? I want to be a penciler. Now I'm lettering, and then later the writing came, or did you always have some desire to write?
I always say that I wanted to write because I wanted to draw and I needed stories to draw. But I'm not sure that's true. I think even younger than that, I was like, I probably have so many novels that I started and just abandoned. So I was always into writing. And I remember even in fifth grade, I used to write this serial of stories that were just like one page, like the old loose leaf line, college ruled paper. I would just make each episode, I'll call them, just one sheet, and I would write it out by hand. And I always left it on my teacher's desk, hoping for like some kind of feedback. Like let me know how this is. And Miss Barron, I remember her, fifth grade teacher, and she did. She always said, "Hey, I like that story. That was a good one. That was great." So I even before I wanted to be a comic book penciler, I was into writing stories. Um, so when I got to the Kubert School and I realized that being a penciler probably wasn't in the cards for me, I leaned into everything, and we had to take a writing class too at the time. So I started not just concentrating on my writing class, but writing my own assignments and taking that very seriously, because we would
Okay.
have to, like Joe Kubert would tell us, like, okay, draw a 3-page chase scene, and I would actually sit down and write the script for it. I wouldn't just like thumbnail out like a chase scene, like, cars or horses, whatever.
Yeah.
I actually like wrote the script and had a printed copy of the script on my desk and worked from that. So as soon as I had the opportunity to write a story, um, I jumped at it. So,
Oh, wow.
for Marvel. So, because I'd been working toward, I wanted to do anything. So I just constantly practiced everything, hoping that my lettering internship and later my lettering freelancing would lead to something. And, thankfully it did.
Wow. And so I think what was the first thing you ever wrote for Marvel? Was it like a Fantastic Four?
Yep. Yeah. It was the Marvel Adventures Fantastic
Mm-hmm.
Four.
Wow. So, um, as you went through writing for Marvel and lettering, um, how did then something like, you start working with like on DuckTales?
Oh boy. Oh, that was many years later.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean I know
Yeah.
it was, but I mean I just kind of curious as to how then like that stuff comes about just from you getting to know people in the industry. I mean, is that something working on a property like that? I think it was what with IDW at
IDW. Yeah.
the time. Yeah. Is that something
Right.
that like you have to pitch them or they approach you like, "Oh, hey Joe, we hear you like, you know, we like this of yours and we're doing DuckTales."
Well, we'd probably have to work a little bit backwards to figure out how that all came about, because, as you know, Disney bought Marvel at some point,
Right.
and some people who worked for Marvel then moved over and started working for Disney. And I didn't just write like Marvel Adventures Fantastic Four and then, somehow, get a job later, years later. I was writing all this stuff that most people probably never even saw, like a lot of custom comics, backup stories, and a lot of the all ages books, things like that. So I was working
Oh
on a
yeah, I
lot of
mean,
all
yeah,
ages stuff.
yeah.
I don't know if you know, but I wrote the Taco Bell Captain America comic. Thank you. That they that they gave
I
out
didn't
with
know
Taco
that.
Bell. Yeah, Taco Bell kids meals. Yeah.
But
So
I'm
I
I'm
wrote
glad
a
that I
lot of
know it
stuff.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wrote a lot of stuff that a lot of
I'm
people,
very
a lot of
familiar
comic
with
fans
your
weren't
all
aware of.
ages. I'm very
Yes.
familiar personally, I'm very familiar with your all ages, Marvel stuff. Probably because like trying to get my kids into
Right.
comics and superhero comics, I latched on to any of those all ages ones that I could find and they were
Oh yeah, and I
fantastic.
wrote a ton of those things. And
Yeah.
like I said, people who worked at Marvel then were working at Disney, and they knew me from writing all ages stuff. So I started writing some short stories for Disney Comics. I was working on Zootopia, a whole bunch of things that a lot of them never even saw print in the United States, actually. A lot of stuff.
Oh,
And
really?
then,
Like just it was marketed for, like
yeah, well, Disney
just
publishes
Europe or
and
somewhere else?
yeah, exactly. Right.
Okay.
And some things just go straight to Disney Magazine. Like, it's not stuff that comic book fans would find in the shop on a Wednesday. A lot
Okay.
of Disney stuff that ended up elsewhere in other parts of publishing. Um, so I ended up working actually on comics that were tied into some Mickey Mouse video game that I don't think ever came out. So they canceled the project. And because they canceled that project, they said, "Well, hey, we're working on a Three Caballeros animated series, and we want to do tie-in comics. So, do you want to do
Oh,
that instead of the
I
Mickey
love the
Mouse
Three
thing?"
Caballeros.
Me too. And I'm like, you know what? I would love to do that. Yes. So I started
Provided
working on that.
oh,
And
wow.
before I even had the chance to even write one script, they said, "Oh, you know what? We're canceling that project.
Oh,
Um, would you mind writing DuckTales? And I was like, what?
Really?
Like, what? That's like the best thing you've said so far. Like, I loved the Mickey
Yeah.
Mouse game, and I loved, Three Caballeros, but yes, I would love to write DuckTales. Are you kidding me?
Oh,
So that's
wow.
how it came about. Like, I was working on other things that were getting canceled. So and DuckTales didn't, and it turned out to be fairly popular.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're for listeners, for any listeners who haven't like read them or think that, oh, they're more geared towards kids. Like, yeah, I read them to my kids. Charlotte's 12 now, and I think a lot of them were, when they were coming out. I know I saw Joe, your name on quite a few of them that we bought at the comic
Right.
book shop. They're delightful. They're just
Oh, thank you.
they're so good. The art is phenomenal. The stories are a lot of fun. The only downside is when I would read to my kids before they learned how to read, I like to do voices, and I can do an okay Scrooge, but I suck at Donald.
Yeah, you can't.
I can't
No one,
I
you
can't
can't do
do it.
Donald's voice. And what's
No.
funny is you're trying to write Donald Duck dialogue, but none of it reads right because you can't say it like in the Donald Duck voice. Like sometimes I read the lines out loud to see if they make sense. I'm like,
Oh, sure.
it sounds so sophisticated. That doesn't sound like Donald Duck because you're not doing the voice.
Yeah.
So Donald was
Uh,
such a difficult character to write for that reason. Like, you have to almost try to listen in your head of what it would sound like because you certainly can't do it.
right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm someone when I write, I say the dialogue out loud too. Like my
Yeah.
wife will, if I write downstairs and my wife walks by, she's like, "Did you say something?" And I'm like, "I'm just trying to write." She goes, "Why are you
Yeah,
talking out loud?" I'm like, "I need to hear it."
that's
But
the
yeah, I never
writer's
thought
life.
about
You're
that. A,
talking to
a,
yourself. Yeah.
a character who has a difficult voice trying to get the dialogue right. Yeah, that must be a challenge with
Yeah,
Donald.
for
Were th-
sure. And
were there
for some
any of the
reason, also on Frozen, like, it was such a struggle for me to write Olaf's dialogue because I couldn't do the voice. Like, I could hear what it sounds like. Like, I know how Josh Gad says it, and when I hear it, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, duh." But then when I'm just sitting at my computer trying to read back, like, Olaf dialogue, I can't do the voice, and it's like, "Ah, it doesn't sound right." I don't know, but the dialogue was fine. It was just my voice didn't sound right. So, in my head, I'm like, "Oh, this dialogue doesn't seem like it's in Olaf's voice."
um were there any, just because I'm like fascinated with the DuckTales universe in the
Mhm.
new series that was out and also the comics. Were there any side characters that you really loved when they, being able to use in a story that you're like, "Oh, this is great."
Oh my gosh. There were a lot of characters that I wanted to write, and they wouldn't let me for one reason or another. Trying to think if there's any, I don't know. I loved Louis so much that I didn't really focus too much on the side characters or like the background characters. I would I pitched so many Louis stories that at one point they're like, "Joe, you gotta stop. We can't just make this a Louis series. Like, you have to spread it around and pitch us some other characters as the focus of the story." But I just love that character so much. It was
Uh,
great. Like, if you remember the show, he was like a schemer, like a
oh yeah,
like a con
yeah,
man, always like with his get rich quick schemes. It was a lot of fun. So
yeah. Oh, that's phenomenal. Is there anything else? I mean, not that writing, more than one volume of Space Chasers and the lettering work that you do. Is there anything else you had, coming out that listeners should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I do. Exactly 1 month after the first Space Chasers book, I have a middle grade novel coming out that I wrote with YouTubers that maybe your kids might be familiar with, the FGTV family, the Funnel Vision. They have a whole bunch of channels. I co-wrote with them a middle grade novel called FGTV Presents Campfire Tales, and it's again the first in a series. It's the Campfire Tales, and this one's subtitle is The Cursed Campground. So that was a lot of fun because I'd written novels before, like young reader novels for Marvel back in the day. I wrote a couple of Spider-Man ones,
Right.
which were very short. These are a little bit longer because they're middle grade novels, so it was a lot of fun.
Oh,
So
that's
check that
awesome.
out. Yeah, it comes out March 4th. It's FGTV Campfire Tales, The Cursed Campground.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was just looking up, uh, yeah, Funnel Vision and FGTV, and yes, I have seen them when I look over my kids' shoulders and asked, "Why are you still on YouTube, guys?"
Yeah, they
So
have millions and millions of followers, so
yeah,
everyone's kids probably know who they are. So I
yeah,
get
yeah.
whenever I have their other books, because I've been working with them for years now.
Uh huh.
Whenever I have any other graphic novels on my table, kids are like, "Oh, this is the one that I needed. I have all the other ones." I'm like, "Yeah, of course you do." Like everybody knows the FGTV. you know, it's a very popular thing right now. They even have a game at Chuck E. Cheese now. It's based on one of the graphic novels, FGTV At a Time. It's a time travel story. So check that out.
Nice. All right. Yeah, that sounds great. Um, so that's out March 4th.
March 4th. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I've been following you on social media for a while. I mean,
I know. We've been talking for years. So
yeah,
I'm glad I'm
and
finally here.
yeah, I am too. You have to. Are you still getting into donuts? I hope.
Oh, yeah. Always. I'm trying to cut back a little bit just because
Yeah.
I was on such donut overload after, from a couple years back when I did the 204 trips to Krispy Kreme.
Right. Yep.
So,
That was a lot. I
yeah.
was rooting for you,
Yeah. Thank you.
and you raised money for charity, which is phenomenal.
I did, yeah. We raised about 3,000. I don't know the exact number anymore, but it's not on the top of my mind anymore. But over
Yeah.
$3,000, and then I went on the Drew Barrymore show, and they kicked in an additional $10,000. So
Yeah.
that was awesome. Yeah, it
That
was
had to
worth
be
all the
incredible.
donuts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for
Well,
sure.
if you ever make your way to Delaware, North Wilmington again, there's a great little donut shop near me called Sleeping Bird Doughnuts that make, if you're into fancy donuts, they do
Oh,
so if you ever in
all
town,
kinds.
fancy donuts on me. All right.
All right. Yeah, you got it. You got it. If you have any conventions coming up down there, tell them to give me a call, and I'll come
I'll
down.
let you know. Oh, actually, I should try and talk to them, just talk to people at my shop to see if they're interested if you're available to come down for a signing. 'Cause that would be great to see. And
Definitely. I'm
uh,
game.
there's a lot. They have a great kids section, and I'm sure Space Chasers will look great amongst all the other books there. So
Oh, for sure, yeah.
maybe we can make that happen, and then we'll get some Sleeping Bird donuts. So
There you go. Sounds good.
all right, Joe. Thank you so much, listeners. This has been Joe Caramagna for Comic Book, and Jimmy Gasparo for Comic Book Yeti. Space Chasers that he wrote with Leland Melvin and art by Allison Acton is out February 4th. And then the FGTV, the Campfire Tales,
Yep.
middle grade novels out March 4th. And if you haven't read any of Joe's DuckTales stuff,
Look it
go and
up.
get it. It's so good. I'm sure you can find it. The issues are just absolutely wonderful if you're a DuckTales fan. But
It's
really,
so much fun to write too.
yeah, it seemed like it because the stories are just incredible. But
Thank you. I appreciate it.
so, listeners, happy New Year, and I hope year 2025 is off to a good start. Let me know what you were reading, what comics you're checking out. I really appreciate you listening. And I'll see you next time. Good night.